Stupid Adam making me come to this remote location for who knows what. I swear, if it's just another fetch quest, I'm going to powerbomb him to next Tuesday.
Guys, she's here!
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday, Samus! Great to see you in top shape after so many years. Tell us, what is your secret?
I could tell you,
but then I would have to kill you.
Do you ever remember the first game you played in a series growing up that you end up becoming a huge fan of later on? For me, it's been titles like Star Fox 64, Bomberman The Second Attack, F-Zero X, Mega Man Battle Network 5, Final Fantasy VI, or most notably in my case, the original Metroid Prime on the Nintendo GameCube. It almost seems like yesterday when I first got this game after moving to a new country. I was blown away by the visuals, atmosphere, and hidden lore that I quickly became a big fan of the series. It was a similar result with how Majora's Mask made me want to get more into the Zelda franchise, by offering an interesting world to explore that told a story through its environments. And after getting to experience some of the origins of the Zelda series, thanks to the Game Boy Advance port of A Link to the Past, I was wanting to do the same with Metroid, which fortunately for me was something relatively easy to accomplish thanks to the unlockable bonuses from linking Metroid Prime with a completed save file of Metroid Fusion in order to play the original NES game. I can still remember being so lost and confused that I almost gave up on playing it altogether, since I didn't know where I was supposed to go or what exactly I'd had to do, which in a way made me appreciate how far technology and game development had advanced over the years. But I'll be honest, this isn't a title I'll come back to and replay as often as I do with the rest of the series. And seeing how this game is turning 35 years today in Japan, I can't think of a better time to go back and give it another look with a new perspective to appreciate how much this game did for the industry and see if it's worth giving it a shot nowadays.
Just in time.
Well, before we get into it, how about if we start by going over a brief summary of the game's initial development. Back at mid-1983, Nintendo released their first home video game console on Japanese markets, the Nintendo Famicom, and with it, they strove to develop first-party games to show off what their system was capable of achieving, starting with platformers like Super Mario Bros. And adventure games like Legend of Zelda, which helped place the company on the map in the video game industry. After the massive success of their previous endeavors, Nintendo decided to start working on an action-adventure game, which would be co-developed between the company's research and development Team 1 and Intelligent Systems, the guys who would go to make Fire Emblem, with producer Gunpei Yokoi taking the helm, who was responsible for creating the Game & Watch and the ever-important D-pad we're used to seeing on the controllers. And thus, Metroid saw market release on August 6, 1985 on Japanese markets, releasing only 1 year later in North America, and it became a huge hit by helping create a new genre to the industry and being way ahead of its time. A game with an overall simple premise of a lone bounty hunter, Samus Aran, who is tasked with going to the dangerous planet ZEBETH to stop Mother Brain and destroy the Metroids she's trying to use to rule the galaxy. It's fascinating playing this game today and seeing how many elements that we take for granted in the current industry were first made popular thanks to this title, which helped put Metroid on the map and inspire many players and developers alike. A difference from other games at the time, what made Metroid stand out was its focus on non-linear exploration, tasking players with trying to find their way along a huge map and even returning to previous areas with new items in order to make progress, instead of following the norm of going from one level to the next. And because of this, it also helped give you a sense of growth and strength by seeing how easy you can now navigate the world with your new arsenal and experience. The simple convention that the game forces you to go left in order to collect your first power-up might seem like nothing out of the ordinary, but back in those days it was kinda revolutionizing. It was a simple yet effective way of giving players the mindset to explore older surroundings and not take anything at face value. It truly made players feel like if they were stuck on a giant maze as they try to find where Mother Brain is hiding on the planet, while collecting power-ups to help them get stronger and manage to explore new areas they previously couldn't access. And since there wasn't a traditional level progression like what people were used to with Super Mario's levels or The Legend of Zelda's dungeons, it made the world feel much larger than what it was, and that you were experiencing a big adventure instead of a smaller segmented one. If anything, I have always personally considered this to be one of the first open world games ever made. While it's nothing near the scope of what we can achieve today, I like to think that thanks to how Metroid's world and game design were built together, it helped pave the way for other developers to think outside the box with their level design. But the game isn't as straightforward as collecting some power-ups and then just heading straight to fight Mother Brain in Torian, since you first have to find and defeat the game's other bosses in order to open the entrance to the final area of the game, those being the leader of the space pirates Ridley and his partner in crime Kraid, who are also hidden somewhere in ZEBETH, thus forcing you into fully exploring the world. But I can't deny that the experience isn't quite the best by today's standards. The environments and the levels feel very samey and repetitive, making it super easy to get lost and frustrated, especially since there isn't any in-game maps to help guide you. And to make things a bit worse, Metroid doesn't hold back in throwing a considerable amount of enemies your way that will quickly lower your health. And if you happen to get a game over, then you have to start all the way back at the beginning of the area and try to retrace your steps with low health just to try and make some more progress again. I know it's there for you to farm and get your health or missiles back quickly, but considering that it's hard to shoot your enemies in the first place because of Samus's height and the lack of angles in which you can attack, it can make me feel like I'm more playing a bullet hell like Ikaruga rather than an adventure platformer. But it's something I'm happy to say only happens in some rooms, so I don't think it affects the overall experience that much. I know it's kinda unfair to criticize a game this old for these shortcomings, but I feel it's worth pointing out so we can better appreciate how the sequels improved on the original's formula, and so I can be fully transparent with any newcomers who are curious on giving it a try. However, one thing I don't have any complaints with, it's the music. All the songs are very simple chiptunes that really help you get into the mood of your adventure and offer some personality to the locations you visit. Be it the upbeat theme of Brinstar, the more ominous sounds of Norfair, the adrenaline rush of the escape sequence, or the dread-inducing noises that play in Turian. I overall think the game's audio helps complete the atmosphere of the world that the graphics sadly couldn't fully achieve at the time. Which reminds me, a cool detail about Metroid is that its map and the idea of exploring an intricate cave system were somewhat inspired by Japan's subway, and how the many train lines connected you from one place to another completely underground. It's something made more apparent when you look at the game's map and compare it to that of a metro system, which also happens to be in some way where the developers got the idea of creating the name of the series, by combining the word metro, referring to the trains, with the word android, to help create a futuristic sounding title. Which makes me wonder if the choice of the word android was simply used because it sounded futuristic, or perhaps was a way to refer to the identity of Samus before the game's final reveal. Considering that the original renders show a very robotic looking power suit, I wouldn't be surprised if many people thought that they were playing as an android out on a mission. Since I'm on the subject, can I say that I'm just a huge fan of the original render of the power suit. It really screams that 80s Japanese sci-fi aesthetic that I think adds a lot of charm to the game. A perfect blend of something cartoony looking that can still be somewhat ominous. Maybe that's just the inner Gundam fanboy talking because I love the look of the Zakus, but man, do I really wish more artists out there gave us renditions of this classic look. Anyways, once you beat the other two bosses, you can enter the final area Turian to destroy the titular Metroids before one last fight against Mother Brain. Or, well, more of an endurance round, but here is where another problem appears with the game. A difference from all the other enemies you've faced so far, the parasites have a particular weakness and can only be defeated by freezing them with the Ice Beam and then destroying them with 5 missiles. The problem with this is that if you didn't know this ahead of time and walked into the final area with the power of Wave Beam, then good luck trying to make your way through Turian with a bunch of Metroids chasing after you. So your only choice is going back to find an Ice Beam just to get through this area comfortably. which if you ask me, kinda defeats the purpose of exploration since you have to use a mandatory weapon in order to fight the final enemies. Well, at least fortunately, the developers left one last surprise up their sleeve for the finale. Unlike other games, once you defeat Mother Brain, the credits don't start rolling, but instead, the game presents you with one last challenge. In a last-ditch effort to destroy you, the supercomputer sets the entirety of Turian to explode, and thus you're tasked with escaping back to the surface before time runs out. This final self-destruct sequence is something that I've always found magical, if you may. At the point where the player starts to feel unstoppable thanks to all the power-ups, the game presents you with a challenge that brings you back to feeling more vulnerable than ever before. It doesn't matter how strong you have become, because this is one obstacle you can't simply overcome with firepower, but instead you're forced to run away back to safety. And it's an excellent way to bring back that sense of dread and mortality when you are at your strongest point. And after reaching the surface, your mission comes to a close, and thanks to your efforts, Samus has managed to bring peace to space once again. But just as you think it's all over, the game reveals yet another surprise to end things off, and that's showing you the bounty hunter's true identity. Only if you manage to beat the game fast enough would Samus remove her helmet and reveal the fact that she was a woman all along. Something that is well known nowadays, but back in the day, this was mind-blowing and unpredictable. So yeah, the whole mystery of Samus's identity served as the main incentive for you to replay the game. And I can only imagine the amount of playground rumors that must have surfaced from this mystery alone, or how to even get to see it in the first place. Instead of relying on the norm of making a game extremely punishing in order to give it a longer lifespan, the development team found a more clever way to do this by instead rewarding the player for essentially becoming better at it. But would you be surprised if I told you that the whole idea of Samus being a woman was never planned from the beginning? As the story goes, one of the guys in the development team simply came into work one day and said, "Hey, wouldn't it be kinda cool if it turned out that this person inside the suit was a woman?" And thus, the identity of one of gaming's greatest icons came to be. And it was obviously a big deal back then, since at the time, there weren't many female leads in action-packed video games. And in some fashion, this helped pave the way to a lot of the other popular characters that we know today. It's surprising that this series has come so long, yet has still remained under the radar for the most part. So if Nintendo ever decides to make a special celebration of Metroid's anniversary in the future, I think I'd be happy with a simple combo package that includes all the older 2D games with a unique presentation like what Metroid Prime Trilogy offered in the past. Give it a fun menu and unique theme song, some commercials, the concept art, a music player, and maybe the ability to play the different versions of the games, and I'd be happy. I also wouldn't complain with any other physical merchandise, just to put that out there, so feel free to give me more Metroid goodies to waste my money on while you're at it. Now, with all that I went over, could I still recommend someone to play this game today? Be it a newcomer to the series, or a fan of the genre who never touched an NES before? No, not really if I'm being honest. It's not that I think the game is bad or anything. By all means, it's extremely revolutionizing for the time it was released and is probably one of the best games on the system. But I feel that the later games in the series simply improved on its ideas so much better that it almost makes the NES title feel obsolete in comparison. From the lack of a map feature, the limited combat options, confusing level design, and some frustrating enemies, I feel the original Metroid just hasn't aged as gracefully as other titles. To the point that Nintendo themselves kinda agreed and remastered the game with Zero Mission, in order to make the experience more enjoyable and offer the developers true vision of how the game was supposed to look and play all along. I guess you could totally use a guide to at least understand where you're supposed to go and what items to get first to make the experience all the more enjoyable, but I feel that ultimately defeats the purpose of what made the game charming in the first place, from you making your own notes and such to keep track of your progress. A mindset I know was more the norm back in the day, unless you use something like Nintendo Power, I suppose. But if by any chance you were like me and still want to give this game a try, I'm happy to say that there are many ways for you to experience this game on a variety of consoles. Be it the Virtual Console on Wii U or 3DS, unlocking it as a bonus on Zero Mission, or the Nintendo Switch Online NES service. Or if you want to be extra flashy and not cost effective at all, you can always try linking a copy of a completed Metroid Fusion save file with Metroid Prime on the GameCube, just like I had to do back in those days. Either way, it's impossible to deny that Metroid has been one of the most influential and pivotal games in the industry. And while it might not be the first game to introduce some of the ideas that made it so iconic, it definitely was the one that placed him in the spotlight, and showed that games could be a larger adventure with bigger worlds. It truly was the full package. A traditional action game that used self-growth as a sign of progression, with multiple endings to reward skilled players, and wasn't afraid of challenging your notion of what platformers could be with its maze-like world. So it's not hard to see why it became a fan favorite back in the day, leaving a huge mark on those who got to experience it. And if anything, you could argue that this game and its legacy are more relevant today than ever before, with how its structure and gameplay has directly inspired many independent developers through the recent years with the amazing products they have been able to bring to the table, which have created a whole new scene in the industry. It's quite amazing to see how the concepts and design of this game have managed to still be relevant today. It truly was way ahead of its time, trying to push the envelope not only in what the console could do, but what video games as a whole could strive to become. In the end, it really makes me wonder where would part of the game industry be today if it weren't for the ideas that games like Metroid made popular and intriguing in the first place, and that in some way helped set a standard early on to the type of experiences developers should strive to achieve and offer to their player base.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Samus. Happy birthday to you.